something I'm really grateful that I've done in my current relationship with my partner that I didn't do previously. And I appreciate this is an enormously privileged kind of position I'm in, right? We actually engaged a therapist just proactively. There was nothing wrong. It was from the outset. And the primary purpose of this was just to get more tools to be able to communicate better with each other. We realized that communication is really everything, and we may not have been taught a lot of these important tools to be able to have these conversations, to be able to be more vulnerable and have more intimacy. So how does someone kind of navigate that? Because if they're hearing you and all of that makes sense, but they just don't have the tools to kind of get there, to get that type of get to that type of partnership, where do they start?
Yeah, so I think you're really touching on something just so important. So in our book, we talk about the idea of social fitness. So social fitness is a metaphor, and it's an idea that we often think about our connections as things that happen. We kind of take them for granted that they're going to work. People in marriages often find out that they don't have skills that can be useful, and they seek help through therapy or through their marital education classes that provide some of those skills as well. Or maybe they have a friend who's been through this, and that friend can mentor them through some of those challenges. But the basic idea is that if we put our relationships on autopilot, if we don't sort of make them an active part of our decision-making to prioritize them, they can wither. We need to cultivate those relationships. So we asked folks in our study when they were in their late 70s and early 80s if they had any regrets. And we were curious to see what kinds of regrets came up. The most common regret by far was that something about relationships. I should have spent more time with the people I cared about was the most common version of this. I should have been kinder to my people I worked with, to my partner, to my husband, to my children. I wish I had been more forgiving in some of my relationships. So when people have the benefit of 80 years of experience in life, they often look back and wish that they had learned things or done things differently when it comes to relationships. We all have that opportunity. So it's not just about marriage, it's about all of our relationships. If we don't attend to them, if we don't cultivate them, they tend to wither over time. So what does that mean? We want to think about who are the important people in our life. We want to think about how much time we're spending with them and what the quality of that experience is like when we're with them. Are there ways to maximize our time with those folks that we experience as uplifting and energizing and are important sources of support for us? And that means regular times to get together. So my colleague that I wrote the book with, who's also a good friend, Bob Waldinger, and I, we talk every week. It's been recently on Fridays. We talk the last several years, and we've been doing that for 30 years together. We have a commitment to each other. So there's some weeks where I talk to Bob more about important stuff from my life than I might talk to my wife about if I've had a particularly busy week. So we have a date that we don't break. It happens each week. For other people, it could be a walking engagement with a good friend. It could be a coffee date that they have with people or a regular lunch date that they have. But we need to invest that time. And when we're with that people, we need to be able to be present. So we need to be able to put the distractions in the modern world, those phones that we carry around, we need to be able to put them away and really be interested in the other person. So you and I, Simon, are looking at each other. We're doing this over the length of this conversation. I'm enjoying the conversation. Part of it is being present and reading each other's cues and being interested in what the other person is saying. It's such a gift when we do that to someone else. And when we receive it, boy, does that feel good. But it's very hard to do that for people these days. So those are some of the skills of really making the commitment. And then there are relationships that aren't working as well that we need to think about. Are there ways to fix them? Is that person willing to work with me? Are there skills that I could, acquire through some assistance, therapy, education, classes, reading books? Are there things that I can acquire that will help me navigate with this person? And then there's some relationships that have always been kind of difficult, maybe even abusive for longer periods of time, that we may need to think more clearly about getting out of, that they may be important relationships to eliminate from our life. Those are very hard and very personal decisions, but taking stock and being proactive, it promotes our social fitness is the key idea.
Okay, so social fitness, a degree of intentionality is required. Just thinking about my circle of friends and family, and I may have this completely wrong. It seems like some people are just naturally better at this. Are they being more intentional, or did they grow up in an environment where the modeling was different, the relationships in their household look different, or is there, personality traits, or what explains this kind of difference that I feel between certain individuals who are really good at just keeping their relationships healthy and others that let their relationships drift and slide?
So a few thoughts. And the first thing I want to say is there are very few people really in life that can go through all of their relationships magically without any challenges. So the person who appears very at ease in a group, for example, the jovial person in your friendship group who's always bringing people together and the life of the party, you may not know as much about what their experience is like, for example, with their intimate partner. There may be challenges there that are more hidden, that are difficult for people. So, of course, personality is part of the factor. Some of us are introverted. We thrive best when we're with one or two people in a more intimate setting. We also need time, perhaps, to relax and chill after that, to kind of recover. And some folks are really extroverted. They thrive in a crowd where there's lots of activity and energy. So we need to recognize that. But relationships are critical for everyone. That's the key idea. It's not that introverted people don't need relationships. They just may need a different kind of relationship and less energy, less noise. There are skills we can learn, though, as well. So, in the States, there's a big discussion about, in addition to the 3 R's, reading, arithmetic, and what's the third R? I've forgotten what it is. That we need attention to these kinds of social skills. So listening to people, being attentive, right? There are many people concerned about young people's attention span. We joked even before we went on, we made a brief joke about TikTok and the length of videos on TikTok compared to this kind of long form podcast, that people's attention spans are being trained to be very short. I teach for a living, right? I've been teaching for over 30 years, and it's gotten harder to teach longer classes where I'm trying to sustain the attention of, 18 to 23-year-olds. It's gotten harder to do that. So there are skills that we can learn, and some of those skills, again, are being present, being attentive, being interested in emotion, learning how to communicate my needs to other people. Those are things that you can start to learn in kindergarten and in grade school, and you can continue to develop. As you said, some people find in adulthood that there are skills that they need that they never got anywhere. Some folks are clever about it, or some organizations. So there's some churches, for example, that will do premarital counseling, or even after you get married, counseling that's intended to enrich marriages. Those have been around for a long time. And there's secular programs as well. So you don't just need to find it in a therapist, although a couples therapist is a great place to find it. And a lot of people are working on these skills in their own therapy, right? Trying to figure out how to navigate close connections, how to tell people that are important in their life that they wish they could see them more than they do. That kind of being vulnerable thing is hard, especially for people that have a history of being burned in some way, being hurt when they're in close relationships. It's hard.
Is there any data on whether extroverts or introverts in general create better quality relationships? If I was going to guess, I would guess that extroverts are better at creating more relationships, quantity, but the question of who's better at creating quality relationships, I'm not sure I'd be able to answer.
I think it's a good guess because I'm not sure there's a clear set of findings about the quality of relationships. So if we think about the things that we need to get from relationships, which is a sense of connection, an opportunity to share important aspects of ourselves, that probably introverted folks may go about it in a different way than more extroverted folks. but I think they may achieve that quality of connection at a similar level. That it's not about the quality, it's more about the number of people you connect with and the number of people you can keep in your network. So extroverts in some ways have more work to do when they have a larger circle of friends to keep those connections alive and to cultivate those relationships. That's a lot of work it takes to cultivate a large network. And introverts look at that and they say, oh my goodness, I don't have that energy. It's hard enough for me to, mount the energy to sustain, a connection with one or two people in my network. So I think the quality of the experience differs in the sense that it feels different in that relationship for an introvert than an extrovert. But when we talk about the quality in terms of the important things that we get out of connections to others, being known, being seen, being heard, getting the kinds of support, I think across personality types, there are ways to achieve those outcomes.